Hello, my name is David and welcome back to my channel. As you can see from the view behind me, today we're talking board games. So instead of getting my continuation of my top 25 countdown, I figured I'd take a moment and first do what I had promised would come eventually during this series, and that is good board games for new board gamers. Uh, in other words, ones that are relatively easy to learn, so pretty short rule set, and can usually be finished within 2 hours or less. Most of these will be 60 to 90 minutes, maybe a little bit longer for your first time through. Some of them will be even shorter than that, but I wanted to give some good recommendations. And I'm limiting them to just ones that we have on our shelf and ones that we've played, we enjoy, we've kept them because we do enjoy them. There are a lot of other ones. There's standard entry point with games such as Ticket to Ride and Carcassonne, which we do actually have versions of both of those. Just make a couple of recommendations with ones off of my son's shelf over here. So Carcassonne is a recommended. This is the My First, where you lay tiles to build out cities and place your people out. Ticket to Ride being another great recommendation, where you are collecting cards and using those cards to place trains to complete routes that you get. I've got this Dragonomino, which is my first Kingdomino. So Kingdomino is a great recommendation, where you are doing these double domino tiles to build a landscape in order to score points. And we have a My First Castle Panic, which is kind of a cooperative. You're defending the castle against invading monsters, and this one is very simple and a single path. In the full game, you've got the board and the castle's in the center, and you've got enemies coming from multiple directions. Those are all great entry points. Those are very standard ones, and there's nothing against any of those. I highly recommend all four of those as great starting points, and I'll include those down below. One that is recently regarded as a really good starting point, but one that I've only played once. We're borrowing this copy from a friend, actually, and I've only played it so far at 2 and found it to be just okay at 2. There are definitely games on this list I like more with 2 players to play, but I've got it on really good authority that Parks is a great game to get as a first early set of games to build your collection. And so I wanted to pass that along because I have friends that I know and trust their judgment that Parks is a good game. It's also a very pretty game where you're moving people along a path to collect resources to turn in for cards that score you points. So those 5 preamble out of the way, because I can't just keep it at 10. Yeah, so I've got 10 here. I'm going to start with my smallest. So now that we're actually onto the list, I've made my pre-5. So the next recommendation I have here is Circle the Wagons, and this is a little wallet game. This is from Button Shy Games, and you want to get familiar with this company regardless of where you're at in your board gaming journey. So they make wallet-sized games that you open up. You could store the cards inside. The rules are really small for most of these. Got a whole bunch of extras in here. So the rules are just a little fold out, double-sided. Usually something that you can learn in 5 minutes. You can sit down across from somebody, pull it out, learn the rules, and play. Circle the Wagons. You're drafting the tiles. They're out in a circle. You pick a tile or pick a card, you place it in your little area, and so you can cover parts of the cards as you're playing them out. So you can cover previously put ones, and you're trying to score points based off of 3 different objectives that will score you points. So every game is going to be different. You have different things that are worth points, as well as biggest areas of each of the 6 colors will score you 1 point for each square in that color. So it's a fun, quick little 2-player game that you can play in about 10 minutes. And that's a really good one. Another one from Button Shy is Seasons of Rice. This is another 2-player one that my wife and I really, really enjoy, where you're also building a landscape, but this time it's kind of rice paddies, and you've got paths that you've got to line up and close in order to score points, and you've got cards that you're kind of drafting. There's a lot of different games that are offered by Button Shy. They're about $12 a piece. They're really, really great company to work with. They have some phenomenal games for 2 players, for more, for solo games. So just 1 player, they've got some of those in their lineup. And I can't recommend their games highly enough. So that's the first game I'm recommending. Next, I've got my smallest boxes first. Is Herbaceous by Pencil First Games. And so in this one, you've got these lovely flower herb cards that you got. And so everybody's got their own little personal area for cards, and then there's a common pool out in the center. And so when it's your turn, you're going to flip over exactly 2 cards, one at a time. And with that first card, you reveal it, and you decide if you're putting it in your personal garden or if you're putting it up in the central garden where anybody can take from. And wherever you put that, the other card that you don't know what it is has to go to that other spot. So it's a little bit of kind of pressing your luck, because the ones in front of you, only you can have access to. But the ones that go in the center, anybody can pull. And you've got 4 different pots that you have to fill over the course of the game of different types of things. So pairs, different ones, all the same. And so by fulfilling these, that's how you're going to get points based on what you pot in there at what time in the game. And it's a matter of waiting until the right time at the start of your turn is when you have to decide to do the potting of things into there, and you can pull from your own garden and the centralized garden into that pot. And so if you wait too long, then somebody else is going to take the ones from the middle that you want. If you do it too soon, you might miss out on opportunities that you would have had otherwise had you waited an extra turn or 2. So it's a nice little quick, plays up to 4 players, where you have that tough decision of how to gamble and when to pull the trigger on things. It's very light. It's got a lot of luck in there because you don't know what's going to flip, but I find it to be an enjoyable aspect of the game. Now, another shorter game that plays up to 4 players that has a lot of really tough, meaningful decisions that you have to make is called Arboretum. And this is by Renegade Games. And this game is also lovely. You've got trees, and depending on the number of players will determine how many of these trees. And each tree that's involved in there has numerical values 1 through 8 in that tree that are shuffled into there. And so during your turn, you're going to draw 2 cards, and then you're going to play 1 card into your Arboretum in front of you, and you're going to discard 1 card face up into a pile that people can then take from when they're drawing, because when you draw, you can either draw from the center deck or from the top card of one of the discard piles. And so you're trying to build this connection of trees that's going to score, and you have a hand of 7 cards. So at the end of the game, you're still going to have 7 cards in your hand. And you will only score the type of tree where you have the most points still in your hand of that card type to be able to score what you've placed out, which I think is absolutely brilliant. The value 8 cards are the highest out there, but if somebody else is holding the 1 value of that same type, that trumps the 8, because the 8 becomes then worth 0. It's very, very tough. It's entirely possible to score absolutely nothing in this game. It's good. It's tough. It will make you hate the person sitting across from you because you were convinced that you were able to score these 3 types of trees, and now you've been able to score none of them. And you're just sitting there weeping because you don't have any points left at the end of the game because, well, you put all your good cards out in front of you instead of holding on to them, but you can't hold on to them because you've got to hold the ones that you don't want your opponent to score, so you've got to hold some of theirs. That is such a tough decision to make, and that's what I love about Arboretum. It is one of our most played games with a very good reason. It plays great at 2, it plays great with more than 2, and I can't recommend that strongly enough. Next we have Century Spice Road by Plan B Games. And this one is a fun little game because this is doing essentially the same kind of concept that you're doing in something like Parks, where you're trying to get the right resources to turn them into for a card that's going to score you points at the end of the game. However, in this one, you start with 2 cards and some cubes, and there's 4 different color of cubes. So yellow is your most common, then red, then green, then brown, and so they can kind of upgrade in progression. And what you're trying to do is trying to get the cubes that match on the point cards, turn them in to get points that you will have at the end of the game. And there's a market of cards that you can buy that go into your hand that can then help you to get free cubes to help you convert cubes of specific colors into a specific other set of cubes. There are ones that can let you just straight up upgrade to the next 1 or 2 along the line for that cube color. And so you're trying to manage both the cards that you're taking into your hand so that you are able to take enough cubes and to turn them into what you need in order to score points, while also trying to fulfill those contracts to score the points before your opponents get to them as well. And so it's a really fun and interesting game. It's a relatively quick game. The rules is a single sheet of paper front and back. So it's a real easy one to learn and to get going. There's not any reading on the cards themselves. All of it is you can look and see exactly what this card does. So that's a really easy one to learn. There's 2 other games in that same series, so to speak. There's a Century Eastern Wonders, where you're sailing ships to collect goods. And then there's Century A New World, where you're putting people out on spaces to collect goods to turn in for points. You can mix and match with those. So if you have 2 of the games, they have rules to where you can combine them into one unique experience. If you have all 3, you can combine all 3 of them into a unique experience as well. And so all of that's really fun. I strongly recommend Century Spice Road. I enjoy it tremendously. So next we have one of the longer games on this list in terms of playing. I've got to take the sleeve off here. And that is Everdell. And this one is by Starling Games. Everdell is a lovely game. So this game, you have forest animals. They're your little workers, and so on your turn you're going to put them out onto one of the spaces to collect resources or to draw cards, or you can play cards from your hand by spending those resources, and then those cards go out in front of you, which can either give you things that happen right when you put them out, or that happen continuously when certain things trigger or during certain seasons. And so each round you'll get more workers that are stored up on the tree. So as you go, you'll have more people to be able to put out and do more things. You'll have more cards out in front of you that will also let you do more things and have access to new spaces and abilities and fun stuff like that. And the really cool thing about this is, so normally you'll have like rounds, so you'd play till everybody's got all their people out and take their people back all at the same time, and then everybody's kind of moving at the same pace through the game. But in this one, if I get done first in the first season and I take all my workers back, you could still be on that same one for 3, 4, and 5 more turns while I've moved on to the second season of the game. So I've got more workers available. I might have more options available as I'm going because I'm a little further along, but I might not have as many combos that I'm building to be able to do better things as I'm going along. So everybody's kind of going at their own pace through there. It's entirely possible that at the end somebody might finish 5 or 10 minutes before everybody else, depending on how they manage their stuff, which can happen. But I think it's interesting that they have it going at different times. You can be on different seasons in the game and all of that. And so this one's a really fun one. It's a combination between worker placement, which is my wife's favorite aspect of a game is taking people and putting them out on spaces to get stuff, and having cards that have texts that have combinations that give you good pairings if you get the right ones out together and build some synergy off of those cards. And that's one of my favorite things in games, is being able to build synergy between cards. And so this is kind of the marriage between our two favorite parts of games, and that is what makes Everdell a really great experience. Next we have Wingspan. This is by Stonemaier Games. This is yet another one in the pretty games line of games. They've all been pretty so far. Don't worry, there will be some. 3 of the last 4 are not pretty games. So this is one where every card that you have in this deck has birds on it, like real birds and information about birds. So if you want to learn more about birds, the bird is the word. You got to get Wingspan. You will learn so much about the birds and the size and different things about them and be able to identify them. But the premise of this game is that you are collecting birds and you're getting resources to put them out into one of your 3 rows of your little line of cards, which then they'll give you abilities that you can then use to trigger other things in order to score more points and get more things out. There's a little thing with dice, and that's how you'll get resources, because there's a row where you can take resources out of there. So you'll take the dice and you take the resource that it shows. You can buy birds, you can play them out, you can draw more cards, you can lay eggs onto cards, which then you have to pull off to be able to put out more cards. And eggs at the end of the game are also worth points if you still have some out. And you get some secret objective cards that nobody else is going to score, but you can if you get enough of a certain type of bird or size of bird, or it'll give you different goals to shoot for. And then each of the 4 rounds, there's also a common goal that everybody's shooting for, and based on how you do on that will determine whether you've got 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th in that category. And so you'll get more points for scoring higher on those as well. And so there's a lot of really interesting things to consider in that one. Wingspan's a really, really popular game, and with good reason. It's fun. It's never going to be my favorite game. None of these are my favorite game. But it's a good fun, and I never will say no to playing any of these games. Next, we have the first in the not pretty lineup of games, and that is Kingdom Builder. So this is published by Queen Games. This is one that probably you won't hear mentioned by very many other people. This is designed by Donald X. Vaccarino, who is more commonly known for Dominion, which is a very popular deck building game with a lot of expansions out there. And Dominion's fun enough, but I think this is his best game that he's designed. And so in this one, you got 4 boards regardless of the number of players. And you've got, I think it's 40 houses each, and you're trying to put the houses out. So when it's your turn, you're going to reveal the card that you have, and you've got the houses that you get to put out anywhere on the map that matches that terrain. However, there are caveats. If you have houses already out that are touching that terrain, which is that has a space that hasn't been filled yet, you have to put adjacent to where you already have. So once you put some houses down, let's say I put them here in this desert, next time I draw desert, well, I've got to keep putting them in desert, but I might also be touching that forest, so then I have to put them in that forest if I draw forest. And so that's part of the fun of this, is figuring out where to put your initial placements so that you are giving yourself flexibility, giving yourself options, maybe filling something up quickly that might not be touching a whole bunch of stuff so that you can then jump to another part of the board later on in the game. And then each of the boards also has a square or 2 on them that have special powers that you can unlock by building a house next to it, which will then give you an ability that might let you put out more houses or move some houses in a different manner. And there's 4 expansions to this. We love this one. And then there's also scoring objectives. So you'll get 3 scoring objectives that'll flip out for the game out of, I think, 10 in the base game. And so every time you have different targets that you're shooting for. So sometimes you might want them all in one big long up and down row. Sometimes they might all want to be in a horizontal row. Sometimes you want them all next to water or next to mountains. Sometimes you want to have the most in each area in order to get the most points. So it gives you a varying degree of experience every time you play, because you have 3 different goals. You have different maps that are in different orientations, so different powers will come into play based on which maps are out, and figuring out how to maximize what you're given within those confines is the puzzle that I absolutely love in this. A lot of people dislike this game and they say that it doesn't give you enough decision space because you have one card, you have to play that card during your turn, you will get to draw one more at the end of your turn, that's the one that you have to play your next turn. I disagree. I think there's plenty of decision space, and this is one that if you make really poor decisions really early in the game, then it can haunt you. And I think the people that dislike this are the ones that just play poorly and get stuck with those poor decisions. But it's a quick game, plays well in under an hour. So if you have a bad experience, maybe the cards just really are against you for one game, well, it's quick enough that you can reset it and play it again. So that's Kingdom Builder. Let's get the other pretty game out of the way. That is Azul. This one is by Next Move Games. So this Azul is a fun little game. My wife is way too good at it. It's on this list because I recommend it. I don't like picking this game because my wife wins by a lot. I am not good at this game. So there are tiles that will go out each round, pulled out of a bag, so they're different variations. And so each one will get 4 on there, and you've all got a grid here that you're trying to fill up, and there's 5 different colors. And so what you're trying to do is when it's your turn, you're going to take from one of these all the tiles of a matching type. The ones that you don't take all slide into the center, and then those you have to put in one of your 5 rows that are in waiting. And so there's a row that needs 1 in order to be done, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so obviously it's going to take a lot more to fill up the 5 row than the 1. There's problems there. You've got to kind of manage that. And so what you can't do is once let's say I've used the yellow up at the top, like they have here in this picture, well, then I can no longer put a yellow up in that top one because I've already used yellow in that row of the pattern. So it's managing what you're able to take versus what you're able to use. Also, as time goes on, more and more of these will go into that center. Then when you pull from the center, you have to take everything of that color. And let's say you can only hold 2 blue, but there's 5 in that center. Well, you have to take all 5 of them. You put the 2 where you can use them, and then the other 3 go down here at the bottom, which are going to give you negative points at the end of that round. And so the other neat thing about this is, so at the end of the round, every one of these that has filled up, you'll have the one move in, and it will score. And the more that are adjacent to it, left and right or up and down, so having a long row of 3 or 4 all connected there is going to score you 4 points, versus if it's just going by itself, it's going to score you 1. So you'll score both left and right and up and down in continuous sections. So getting it to where they're all kind of clustered together up and down will score you more points than if you're kind of all over the place. And then there's bonuses for having completed rows, completed columns, all 5 of the one color filled in. And so there's a lot of little ways that you can score extra points. This one plays in about 30 to 45 minutes. It's really fun. This is one that you could take on the go with you because it's hard cardboard and then good, I think they're plastic, but heavy pieces. So this is one that even if you're outdoor, it's not really going to blow things away. So that makes this a good game to take with you as you're on the road. So 2 more to go. Thank you for bearing with me. We have Raiders of the North Sea. If you look, you won't find this box because this is the collector's edition box, but you're looking for Raiders of the North Sea. This collector's box lets me hold all of the ones in there. There's not really a good picture on the back because it's just artwork. So let me just tell you about Raiders of the North Sea. this is a worker placement. So if you remember, this is my wife's favorite thing in games is worker placement. And this one has a Viking theme, which speaks to my heart. And in this game, you have exactly one worker that you get to place out. And there are spots down in the bottom of the board, and that's kind of the main town area. So they are spots that you can go to get things such as getting money, getting resources, some provisions that you need to go out on voyages, to where you're able to get more cards into your hand, where you're able to play cards from your hand, and things of that nature. So part of the game, you're spending down in that main town area to collect resources, to collect money, to put people out, to get a crew for your ship. You can have up to 5 people in your crew. And then at some point in time, you're going to start going out to different spaces. And there are 4 different tiers of, or 3 tiers of spaces with 4 different types total. And so the easiest ones to get to are really close by, and they're kind of the coastal areas, and they aren't worth a lot of points, but they're going to give you new worker colors, because there are 3 different colors of workers. And depending on which color of worker you have, unlocks certain spots. So you definitely have to go to those spots. And when you go to those places, they will have resources that get put on there at the start of the game, randomly pulled from a bag. So you could get cattle, you could get gold, you could get ore, or you could have some Valkyrie skulls, which Valkyrie skulls are the fun part of this. Every time you get a Valkyrie skull as a reward from there, you have to sacrifice a crew member. They die. They died in battle, glorious battle. They go off to Valhalla, whatever. And that will move you up the Valkyrie track, which will be worth a lot of points if you get close to the top of that track. But it reduces your crew. And remember, you can have up to 5 of them. And the higher up spots, you need a lot more power to be able to maximize the points you get, because the more power you have on your people that are in your crew, the higher potential you're going to have for scoring points when you go to those more prominent places at the end of or in the second half of the game, as you're getting up there to the more lucrative spots that also happen to have fewer resources that are put on them. And so it's a fun little game where you spend part of the time down in the town, and you'll continuously have to go back down to the town area to replenish some of your stuff before you can go back out again and hit those higher areas that are going to be more costly. It's going to need more provisions. It's going to need more people to be able to go there, more power to be able to conquer it successfully. And so that is what I enjoy about Raiders of the North Sea, because it is just a continuous building up of things that you may end up having to sacrifice along the way in order to make more progress. So last but not least, this is one that I don't know if my wife would ever enjoy, but it is one that I enjoy. So I also play a lot of historical games, and I wanted to make sure I had one good historical recommendation on here, and that is the Commands and Colors system as a whole. There are a lot of different Commands and Colors titles out there. I happen to be holding up Medieval, which is my bread and butter, if you know me. They have Ancients, they have Napoleonics, they have the Great War, they have, I'm trying to think of what else they've got. They've got a Battle Lore, which is kind of a fantasy-themed one. They just released a Samurai Battles version, which is a lot of fun. They've got a Game of Thrones version of this. And they all follow the same kind of premise. There's a couple of exceptions. So the Great War and Red Alert Space Fleet Warfare is another one. And Battle Lore and the Game of Thrones all have little plastic miniatures that you use instead. The ships in Red Alert Space Fleet Warfare are fantastic. But the other ones, you have wooden blocks. But the same premise applies to all of them, in that you have a hand of 4 or 5 cards, depending on the scenario and which side you're on. And you have groups of blocks that are out there on the board. And this map, it's got little hexes along there. And it's divided in 3 sections. So you've got a center section and a right and a left. And there's a dotted line that runs up along through all of it. And there might be some terrain on there. We won't talk about the terrain because that's not important. And you have 3 different kind of classes of people. You've got the green circles, which are kind of your light units. You've got the blue triangles, which are your kind of medium units, and your red squares, which are your heavy units, which are your big hitters. And so during your turn, you're going to play one of those cards from your hand. And it's going to tell you what you can command. So for instance, it has here order medium troops. So it would let you move blue troops. But you might also have like this outflanked. Yeah, outflanked, which lets you move one from the left and one from the right. And then there might be one that lets you move 3 in the center. And so those are, you get to pick that many groups of the blocks to be able to move. And they all have, depending on what type they are, they'll be able to move a certain number of blocks. And then after they've moved, they might be able to attack as well. And so depending, the higher the value, typically the more dice you're going to roll to try to get hits. And the dice are, it doesn't have a picture of them on there, but they have the symbols. So they'll have red squares and blue triangles and green circles and things like that. And so you're trying to roll the symbol that you're trying to attack. So if I'm bringing my red square up there and attacking your green circle people, I might be rolling 5 dice and I'm trying to roll green circles to hit your person. And then it's got really interesting dynamics because you're trying to maximize what you're doing with that hand of cards to figure out, okay, which group of people am I able to use to maximize my benefit? Some of them have really, really strong powers. Medieval is probably my favorite iteration of it because they have armor and some other really interesting things in this. But for a historical game, this one plays in about an hour per scenario. These typically come with about 20 different scenarios that you can set up, so you get a lot of replay value within the box. And it's just good, lighthearted fun. As if you don't mind, having to try to maximize what you're able to do with that hand of cards, as well as, let's face it, dice are sometimes going to go against you. If you don't mind those two things being in play, it's really fun. It's fast, it's furious, and I enjoy it every time I hit the table with my friend. And it's one that maybe I'll convince my wife to try the Game of Thrones version or the fantasy version sometime, maybe. But if nothing else, I've got a friend that will always play this with me, so I'm always happy to play that with him too. Because Commands and Colors is just a great system. It's one that we can just pull out when we just don't want to think much and just go and see what we can do and crash our forces together and see who's better. So those are the, 15 recommendations. I'll have all of those listed down below. And so I'll be returning later this week with my 15 through 11 countdown. And then the week after that, I'll probably continue that countdown and get up through the end of it. And then after I get through the rest of my top 25, I'll probably do a video with just like 5 game recommendations for 2 players, because I play a lot of games with just me and my wife. And so having games that play really, really good at 2 players. And these are going to be ones that are designed as 2 players. So you saw, I think Targi was in my last video as a recommendation. That'll absolutely be making that list. But ones like Arboretum, which is still great at 2 players, but it plays 2 to 4, won't be on there just because it plays at a higher player count. And I kind of want to give a shout out to the ones that play really good that are just 2-player only games. And I've got a fair number of those to choose from. So thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around for this really long video. Sorry. You get me started on board games. This is what happens, you guys. So sorry. Have a great night.